The invisible weight of seeing too much. There's a kind of person who carries a burden that almost no one notices. They walk into a room and feel everything. The discomfort no one mentions, the smile hiding sadness, the anger disguised as silence. It's as if they see beyond appearances, beyond words, beyond the masks the world wears to survive. And while many call it sensitivity, intuition, or empathy, there's something deeper and more dangerous at play. The weight of seeing what others cannot see. Have you ever felt that? That strange feeling of seeing too clearly in a world that prefers the dark? Because there's a fine line between perception and being consumed by it, between seeing the truth and being wounded by it. Most people live in the comfort of functional blindness. They don't notice what hides behind gestures or hear what silence screams. They live by a quiet agreement, pretend everything's fine. And it works. It works because unawareness protects. But when you see too much, that agreement no longer applies. You see what shouldn't be seen, feel what no one asked you to feel, understand what others fight to deny. And that's when the real weight begins. There's a kind of loneliness born from too much clarity. It's the loneliness of realizing that very few people are truly honest. Conversations turn into performances, smiles into shields, relationships into emotional survival games. And even if you try to adapt, you can't unsee what you've already seen. The curious thing is, no one prepares you for this. No one tells you that seeing deeply can drive people away. Because the gaze that sees too much is the same one that exposes, and humans fear being truly seen. When you look at someone deeply, it's not just them who become naked, you do too. And there's a mutual discomfort, an invisible tension between truth and the desire to pretend. Maybe that's why so many perceptive people feel out of place. They carry the gift of perception and the curse of never being able to turn it off. You can't ignore what the eyes of your soul have learned to notice. And the more you see, the heavier the world becomes. There's a kind of pain that doesn't come from what happens, but from what you understand. When you deeply grasp people's intentions, wounds, and fears, suffering changes shape. You no longer feel only your own pain, you feel everyone's. It's like walking through a minefield of emotions, absorbing every fragment others try to hide. And the more you feel, the harder it is to protect yourself. But there's something even crueler about this gift. The clearer you see, the more confusing the world becomes. You realize that almost everything is contradictory. People say what they don't feel, do what they don't want, believe what they don't understand. And that creates a strange sense of alienation, as if you were a foreigner among your own kind. The problem with seeing too much is that it forces you to choose. Either you speak and get rejected, or you stay silent and rot inside. Neither choice is light. If you speak, they call you dramatic, negative, too intense. They say you overcomplicate things, read too much between the lines. But if you stay silent, the silence kills you slowly. Because pretending not to see is betraying your own consciousness. And that's when many begin to isolate themselves, not out of lack of love, but out of exhaustion. It's tiring to live in a world where almost no one wants to look at what's real. Tiring to talk to people who only want to keep up the act. Tiring to feel everything all the time. Tiring to be awake in a world that sleeps. But isolation is not the end, it's a transition. It's the moment when your gaze needs to learn how to rest. Because seeing the world shouldn't mean carrying it. Perhaps the greatest challenge of those who see too much isn't to stop seeing, but to learn how to see without losing themselves. To understand that perceiving isn't the same as solving. That understanding doesn't mean you must fix. That feeling deeply doesn't require saving anyone. Wisdom begins when you learn to observe without drowning in what you observe. Think about it. Not everything you see is yours to carry. Not every pain you understand is yours to heal. Not every truth you notice needs to be spoken. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is simply to remain aware and silent. The world doesn't need more people trying to fix others. It needs more people who can see with compassion and stay at peace. Who can hold their gaze without judgment, without urgency, without the need to change anything. Because, in the end, that's the kind of gaze that truly transforms. Not the one that points, but the one that embraces. Seeing too much is dangerous, yes. But the danger fades when you understand your role. You're not here to fix the world. You're here to see it clearly and remain whole nonetheless. And that, my friend, is an art. The art of being awake in a world that prefers to sleep. The art of staying sensitive without falling apart. The art of seeing deeply and still remaining light. There's a quiet beauty in those who carry this gift. They are like silent lighthouses. They don't push anyone toward the light. They simply stay lit. And somehow, their mere presence illuminates. Maybe that's the true purpose of seeing too much. Not to change the world by force, but to stay awake enough not to be swallowed by it. To look deeply but act lightly. To feel intensely, but love without the weight of expectation. To understand chaos without needing to control it. Seeing too much may be a burden, but it can also be a path. A path of self-discovery, compassion, and spiritual maturity. Because when you realize perception is a tool, not a sentence, everything changes. You stop being a victim of your sensitivity and become its guardian. And you know what's curious? When you stop trying to save everyone, people start feeling safe just by being near you. Because your gaze stops being a threat and becomes a refuge. It stops being a mirror of shame and turns into a space of acceptance. And that's rare and transformative. Clarity, when matured, doesn't isolate, it connects. But it's a different kind of connection. Deep, silent, true. You no longer need many words to be understood. Awakened souls recognize each other in a glance, a gesture, a silence. And that's when the weight begins to turn into purpose. Maybe what you call a burden is simply the raw form of a gift still being shaped within you. And like every process of refinement, it hurts. But in the end, when excess becomes balance, when your gaze stops hurting and starts healing, you realize it was never a curse. It was life teaching you to see, with an open heart and empty hands. And if you've made it this far, maybe it's because you feel too much too. Maybe you carry that same gift, that same fatigue of seeing what others pretend not to. So tell me, how is it for you? Have you ever felt the invisible weight of seeing too much? Share in the comments. I'd love to know if you've ever felt this way, noticing what no one else seems to see. And if this video touched you somehow, leave a like so I know it resonated. Subscribe to the channel, because here, we talk about exactly that. Living awake in a world that prefers to sleep. And remember, seeing too much isn't the problem. The problem is forgetting who you are in the midst of what you see. Take care of your gaze. It's the mirror of your soul, and maybe the world needs it just as it is, steady, sensitive, and awake.